All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining an XRM virtual session. Today we have Chris Huntingford that is going to be presenting future-proofing your configuration. Um, and with XRM Virtual, we are recording today, so this meeting will be available for you to share with others on our events page. So you will be able to download the recording and send a link to everyone else. We will also tweet the event after it's completed. There's probably already a tweet that's gone out to say the event is also starting. I think that's how a couple of you actually ended up joining here today. We are also always looking out for new speakers. So if you're interested in speaking on a particular topic, or you have a topic that you're interested in hearing somebody speak about and you don't necessarily want to present, then please definitely let us know, because we will definitely go out there and find a speaker to present on that topic. And we do have a submission form on the xrmvirtual.com website where you can submit your own session ideas or your own topics that you would want to speak about as well. And feel free to email julie.yak@xrmvirtual.com if you have any other topics or ideas you want to talk about or have some sort of discussion. Julie is always happy to have a conversation with anyone. Our next virtual session, we don't have one currently set up, but we would be interested to know what you guys are interested in. Some suggested topics we've had in the past are the in-rule integration and DocuSign integration and prospect to cache. So maybe if you want in the chat to indicate your preference on what you might like to have as a next session, then we can definitely take that feedback and have it apply to the presenter that we find for the next one. And without further ado, I'm going to present you Chris Huntingford, and he's been developing since Dynamics version 3. I guess probably not a developer though, maybe more of a technical configurator of sorts, and apparently has quite the affection for multi-select option sets, so you're very happy they're now part of the product instead of having to do it manually like we used to do in all the previous CRM versions. With that,
That's it.
I'll pass it over to Chris and let him continue his presentation and give you any intro that he has.
Awesome.
And
Thanks.
I agree with Matthew. Definitely need them in portals, hopefully coming soon.
Right. Hey, everyone. I'm just hoping that you'll be able to see my screen very shortly. Could somebody just confirm that you are seeing a Dynamics 365 very red presentation?
I am. Yep, I'm good.
Fab. Okay, guys. So, pardon the photo. It's probably the best one on the internet that I've got, other than my wedding pictures, which are actually still pretty bad. I do have to say that that was a delicious milkshake that I was drinking. Anyway, my name is Chris Huntingford. I've been working with CRM, Civil Dynamics 365 at least, since CRM version 3. So, yep, I've got some battle scars from working all over the place. I'm originally from South Africa, and no, we don't have any pet lions. For those of you that would kind of think that, we only have panthers. They're less vicious. I used to work as a support technician, so in support maintenance all over the place. So I've been on loads of different sites. I've worked with loads of different versions of Dynamics. Really thoroughly enjoyed myself. I moved into a pre-sales role 6 years ago, working for Hitachi Solutions at the moment in the UK. Guys, I'm not a dev. I'm very functional, so don't judge me. For the developers out there, all of you guys are of high intellect, so please speak slowly to me and use words that are only 3 syllables or less. I start convulsing wildly if anyone says anything too intelligent to me. So I'm currently married with 3 crazy children. If I do get interrupted, I apologize. And I have a tattoo, random fact, I have a tattoo of a T-Rex on roller skates breathing fire with a chainsaw wearing a blue hoodie. And my name is the Tattooed CRM Guy, and as evidence, there we go. So it is real. Those of you that did wonder, I promise it exists. Anyway, today's session, we're going to be looking at future-proofing Dynamics 365. Now, this is quite a broad topic, and there's a lot I can show. I'm going to caveat a couple of things as I go, just to make sure that you know that this is my opinion, and it's purely based on the fact that I've kind of been around the block with these types of things, and I've learned a few things. So I'm going to try and share my information as much as possible. And again, it's just down to the stuff that I've experienced. So part of the agenda will be, why make Dynamics 365 more future-proof? It's kind of obvious, but we'll get into that. There'll be an implementation discussion around custom versus out of the box versus ISV. I've got two examples, and I actually have a demo prepped for one of the examples. Unfortunately, I can't show you the first one because it is directly on a customer site, whereas the other one is a POC, or kind of something that I built for a demo. Then we'll chat about stuff we learned, so hopefully some takeaways around some things that you guys could use. Some new things to look out for. So one of them in particular is the custom control framework. And if I've got time, I'll do a demo. If not, I have done a recording on it before. So if you guys would like to get a copy of that, I can just direct you in the right direction. But hopefully that's the kind of thing that you guys were expecting today. Again, there is no development here. I'm not a coder, so again, don't judge me. So why make Dynamics 365 future-proof? Well, first of all, if you look at the future-proof description or the dictionary definition, to make or plan something in such a way that it will not become ineffective or unsuitable for use in the future. That's pretty straightforward, right? The example I actually had, weirdly enough, was ages ago when I was doing research on this. I found out about a shopping center. I can't remember if it was in the US or the UK. That had not built enough space for extra car parks. So they were humming with business, but they didn't really have the ability to bring in that many extra customers, and that's a bit of a problem. So the development of that specific structure wasn't really future-proof. Now, that's just a kind of very separate example. What about why would we want to make Dynamics 365 more future-proof? And again, I've got loads of random movie references in here, so if any of you guys get these, just shout them out. I'll be pretty impressed. So first of all, why make Dynamics 365 more future-proof? So when, in my experience, when I've worked, particularly in CRM 3 and Dynamics CRM version 4, there was a lot of custom code and a lot of stuff that kind of people just did on the fly because I think Microsoft was still working on, building that support platform. So the reason we try and make things more future-proof is so that when a customer upgrades or accepts a new release, there's less chance that something will break, and thus promoting this as a system that is more easily managed and supported. So as an example, if you've got tons and tons of custom code in there that's not really supported, that system isn't future-proof. So we'd like to kind of focus on making it more future-proof for our customers and making things easier. The next thing, which is huge, and I've experienced this in a lot of the enterprise clients that I've worked on, is most customers will not only use Dynamics 365 for one thing. So it's highly unlikely that you're just going to get a customer that uses it for contact management. Undoubtedly, what typically happens, and as time goes, they start looking at it for other different things, like basic stuff like account management, or really, really end spectrum stuff like project service automation and field services. So your configuration needs to be undertaken in a way that for additional functionality to be added is really easily achieved without massively impacting things. And that's hugely important. And luckily, Dynamics 365 as a framework sort of provides that opportunity to do that right now. And then again, the Dynamics 365 solution can accept and cater for the growth of your customers' businesses. Now, guys, don't think of this as just, we're going to add an extra 50 users. Fantastic. Microsoft's Azure platform already deals with that, or if it's on-prem, your customers' infrastructure should be dealing with the ability to grow from that aspect. But think about things like geographically. So what if my customer moves into a different area and requires a different currency or a different language? Is the current system I'm built future-proof enough to cater for that? And then finally, the ultimate thing here is to solve more business problems, which will increase user adoption and utilization. So back kind of like in the movie Minority Report, we've got to be a bit like the precogs. We've got to try and see things in the future to cater for our customers' needs now. And I'll get onto that a bit later, but that's really, really important. So if you could go back, what would you change? I could think of a load of things that I would change in some of the implementations I've worked on, and that's possibly just because we didn't have visibility into the roadmap, or the customer didn't give us a visibility of requirements. But there's a little thing that I kind of always work on, and don't worry, I'm going to get into the more technical stuff now. I'm just going to cover this off. Is that first of all, we need to have a detailed understanding of our customers' requirements. And often, I found that customers will just say, oh, this is something we need, or this is something we have to have. That's fantastic, but how does that impact them in the future? So a random example would be a customer says, I need to have an entity to deal with an asset, or you might recommend that. But later on, they implement field services. Do you use the field services customer asset entity, or do you continue to use the old one, the custom one that you built, and integrate that? So that's really important. The next thing is things like having sights of the roadmap. Now, from my point of view, this is something that I absolutely love. Those of you that have interacted with me via Twitter or wherever it is, whatever platform it is, you'll know that I like to try and post stuff that's quite relevant and that's happening at the moment. One thing we try and do with our customers is that we try and say to them, well, look, if it's coming in the roadmap, maybe it's worth waiting to implement, right? And I think that's quite important. And I'm going to give you a random example. When the editable grids were released back well, a little while back, we had a solution that we had built that covered that functionality, but with that coming down the line, we didn't want to have to unpick stuff and then implement that. So that's just a kind of example of what the roadmap visibility gives you. And then implementation of desired functionality relevant to the requirements and in the most supported way possible. So for the devs over on the call, and I know there are a lot of you, that also means customizations, that also means code. From this point of view, we're going to focus on configuration. So try and do it in the most supported manner possible. And again, you kind of go around that circle over and over again, where once you've implemented, you chat to them again, you keep eyes on the roadmap, and you see what you can implement. And it's sort of a recurring process, all depending on how your business works. But that's sort of what I've been focusing on from a pre-sales point of view. So one of the big questions that I always come up to from an implementation point of view is, when do we use what's available out the box versus when do we build or configure versus when do we utilize an ISV solution? And essentially, that's kind of what it comes down to is, do we build or do we kind of utilize what's out the box and extend that slightly, or do we plug in an ISV solution that really, really builds out what Dynamics 365 can do? Well, a couple of things. It depends on who you ask. That's the first thing I came up with. In this scenario, you've got good old me, and I can only give you my opinions. Couple of things that I picked up though. Consider this: back in the day with Dynamics CRM 3, Dynamics CRM 4, 2011, and 2013. People used to utilize a lot of code, especially sort of form side code, and there was a lot of it kind of out there. And the thing that interested me was that in previous versions, it often took a lot of code to fulfill what could be done as a standard today. And interestingly enough, that led to a lot of upgradability problems. I mean, those of you that moved from 2011 to 2013 will understand the pain. Very, very interesting. The other thing that I found is that a lot of the devs that I'd work with, their time was spent fulfilling basic customer requirements rather than really extending the platform. So things like making fields visible, making fields invisible, changing the way the UX worked, which just something that I came across. And I kind of thought, well, as a dev, you guys are so talented, it should be used to really extending the platform, not fulfilling that type of function. If you think about the later versions, so obviously with 2015, 2016, Dynamics 365, and then V9, there's a lot more kind of new and improved functionality. So what's been added is the fact that you can kind of generate things like utilize things like business rules to replace that development functionality. Custom versus standards, there was a lot more discussion coming up from that point of view, and it was interesting because you would have thought that that wouldn't be the case, but I found that there was a lot more debate around what should we do standard versus what should we do custom or configured at least. Because of the amount of configuration that could be undertaken and achieved by customer and to achieve customers' requirements, devs really started using their skills, really expanding the product. So if you think about it, that's when development, from my personal point of view, that's when the dev side of things really built up, because there was a lot more to add. And I noticed a lot of ISVs popping up, which was really interesting. And that was really to support the weaker areas of Dynamics. So from that point of view, that's just sort of what I experienced over the life cycle. The solution, again, is entirely dependent on the scenario. So what you guys select will be dependent on you and the way that you work and the scenario that you're in. There are some basic best practices, but again, I'll get to those in the stuff we learned. And just to caveat this is what I understood and I experienced. Okay, so I'm going to get into a couple of examples, and I'm hoping these will kind of interest you guys from stuff that I went through. And it's really, really interesting to see how we crossed over between what was out the box and what was of standard config. And around this kind of thing, I'm happy to take questions and that, and I can try and answer as much as I can around why we did things and what the process was. But this is quite interesting, and I've got two examples, and I will demo you some of the second one to as much as I can. So in scenario one, right, we had a customer, and I think this was around 2015. We had a customer that was really looking at quite a detailed and complex customer service case management scenario, and it was really detailed. I mean, there were loads of categories, there were hundreds of fields, and in order to fulfill their requirements, would need to be a fair amount of config. Now, here's the thing. We saw loads and loads of fields that they needed, and they were just, oh God, it was unbelievable. There were thousands of them. And we had to weigh up whether to build out the functionality from scratch using config or customization. And this is, again, multiplexing and licensing rules aside, or utilize and enhance the standard case entity. Now, what's interesting is we had heard different opinions from different people. Some people said to us, absolutely not, don't bother with the standard case entity, utilize complete custom entities. Whereas from the other side of things, we had people saying, no, absolutely not, don't do that, utilize the standard case entity. We decided on a bit of both, and the reason for this is because if we replaced the standard case entity with a custom one, there would have been a load of stuff we would have had to have built. I mean, things like entitlements, case resolutions, routing rules, etc., etc. There was just far too much in there that said to us, well, no, start from scratch. We needed a lot of that functionality, and we didn't really want to kind of bud the system. The other thing is that we did need to make the solution future-proof. They were a growing business. We knew they were a growing business. We knew that they were adding on different areas of support into their business. So we knew the fact that if we had just plugged everything onto the case entity, we would have had some problems. So the initial decision was to actually utilize both, like I said. We worked out that storing loads and loads of fields on the case form and then hiding and revealing fields and forms based on case type was not going to work. It was just a logistical and reporting nightmare. And if you guys could just think about this, there were just loads and loads of fields. We would have broken something, and imagine they needed another field added. There was no way for us to kind of categorize what we had already done. The data dictionary would have been massive. So we decided against that. What we did decide on, though, was something quite interesting. So we decided on a sort of set of custom entities to represent various case categories. And I can't really dive too much into so if you imagine a complaint, you've got a complaint of various types. You might have a custom entity to represent a specific complaint or complaint type. And then what we did was we associated that to the case header, or the standard case as the case header. Now, if you think about it, what really worked well is the fact that we still had the email to case conversion functionality. We could still utilize the output client as it was then, convert an email to a case, bring that into Dynamics, and that we had that ability to kind of progress that through. The other thing is that we didn't have to worry about managing this horde of fields on the cases. One of the primary things around this delivery was the ability to do reporting. And unfortunately, utilizing all of these fields in that case entity was nuts. It just wasn't going to fly. So again, the standard case entity is the header, and then we had an associated custom case entity. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because you may think that, cool, that sounds all right, but we ran into some problems. And the problems were, well, fantastic. We can have the case, but how does it actually work when it comes to managing multiple cases? And what were we going to do to manage the case hierarchy? Now, because those are two different entities, and that did cause a bit of problem. The other thing was around the business process flows. So if you can imagine utilizing the standard case entity, right, with a one-to-many relationship to multiple of those custom records over here, that was also never going to work, because how we were going to expose business process fields across the business process flow. So the solution was actually in the requirements, and that takes me back to my kind of previous slide where we did a re-review. We kind of gathered back at Basecamp. We knew that, what the solution we had was right, but it actually ended up being more out of the box than we thought. So what we actually did was we created a many-to-one to the custom record. We utilized the standard business process flows flowing directly from there into the custom record itself, right? And then finally from there, it was a similar scenario for the case record, the child case records. So it actually worked out quite well. Again, guys, I'm sorry, I can't demo this to you. It is live at a customer. But what was great is that the fact that it kind of gave us the ability to leverage what was standard, so that when Microsoft added in all the different functionality back onto the case, I think after 2015, we kind of said, well, it doesn't really impact us because the records that we used were out the box. The other thing that was really cool was that from a future-proofing side of things, we didn't completely saturate the case entity with hundreds of fields. So we're just not hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fields all over the case entity. It made reporting an absolute dream. The other thing is that they did have the requirements to use it at a different point. So for us, that really worked well. We kind of said, well, if that's the case, you can kind of pick it up and use it as you need to, and they did, and they added in their own case types, and they utilized the different case forms, etc., etc. Case types could be added or deprecated with simple config. So they didn't really, when they decided that if they needed to deprecate a case type, and the one was actually an inspection type, which they ended up, I think, using survey functionality for, if I'm not mistaken, they could just simply deprecate the case type, not expose the entity, but still have the data as valid. So it was kind of still available to them if they needed to do it. If they needed to add a new case type, that was quite simple for them. They didn't really have much of a struggle there. The case subtypes were not affected much by the new functionality that was added. So it actually works out quite well, where when we added a new case, when Microsoft did update all their information, when they did update Dynamics, those nothing really happened to them. They just kind of stayed in their kind of standard limbo state, but were still being utilized. And then reporting was made much easier because, as I said again, guys, we weren't listing thousands and thousands and thousands of reports across the whole solution. Across the case entity. It was really well, reference the header record, reference what was associated to that header record, and then create the reports. And that worked well for them. It was quite interesting because at the time the data, I don't think, either it may have been in preview or something, but it didn't really exist, so that we were utilizing Power BI. And yeah, I think it was connecting through OData. I'm not sure. But it was just a lot easier to generate and build out the reports. And then the interesting one for us was the security side of things. And this was a big debate in the beginning because they're quite a big organization. How were we going to manage the security? And one of the things was, well, what about field level security? How do we promote different user roles and permissions? If we have hundreds of different forms in the case, how's this going to work? And essentially it worked out quite well because we could just do it at record level. We didn't really have to worry about applying hundreds of different field level security rules to each field on the form. And if the security model changed, there was a whole of loads and loads of less risk to us and to the business, rather than having that break if that ever happened. So that kind of worked out fairly well. That was scenario 1. Do you guys want to ask anything before I go to scenario 2? Cool. Okay, so I'm going to take that as a note. So scenario 2 is a bit of a different one. And the previous scenario was utilizing sort of out of the box and basic config. It actually wasn't a load. The second one was actually building out facilities management using a lot of out of the box functionality and then proper XRM functionality. And this is something I'm going to demo to you guys. But the customer had a requirement to fill a lot of sort of facilities management type requirements and functions, where what would happen was that they had a buildings hierarchy, as an example, that went all the way down into meeting rooms. And they even had assets associated to that, and they needed to manage that from a hierarchy point of view. They did have an application to contract process. Now, I'm not really going to mention the industry, but it's quite simple to figure out. But there were a number of questions around how this requirement was going to work. And, this could be quite complicated or quite simple, all depending. The other thing is that we needed the ability to manage a product catalog. Now, as you guys know, Dynamics 365 has got a pretty decent one from an out-the-box point of view. So we had the ability to utilize that. And then initially, I wanted to try and use the contract entity. Now, it's purely, I've been fighting with that specific entity for a very long time, and I really couldn't find a place where it was going to work. I thought this may be the case, but I made some interesting discoveries, and unfortunately, we didn't go that route. But essentially, facilities management with associated application to contract processes, and then product management. So what did we do? Well, here's the answer. I tried to draw a little solution design diagram in very basic format. So first of all, the FM functionality was very much custom. So we built that primarily out of custom entities, and I'll give you a peek at how that looks. And then we linked that up to core functionality within Dynamics. So we actually linked it to the applications, which is essentially the opportunity. We didn't test or break the opportunity to quote and quotation process. We figured that that was out the box. We didn't want to mess with it because it felt like, it did pretty much as much as we needed. We just added a number of steps into the actual process itself. We utilized the core product catalog. We just built out our hierarchy. We didn't do anything too crazy with that. It was really just about storing kind of some standard products. And then we created a custom entity in place of the out-the-box contract entity. And the reason for that is because, well, partially was because we couldn't even associate a business process flow to the standard the standard contract entity. The other thing is that we kind of found it a bit limiting. There was a lot of stuff we wanted to add to the form. Essentially, it was actually more of an agreement than a contract, but it was quite beastie. So that's pretty much what we did. And then there was a fair amount of case management running along the side of that, and then some field services with quite a fair amount of documentation attached, which we did use SharePoint for. Oops. So why is it future-proof? Well, the FM solution was primarily built out of custom entities. So what happened was when they upgraded, or when there was an upgrade, the upgrade didn't really mess with that kind of XRM functionality. It just kind of sat separately in its own little module and did its own thing. But also we built it that way so that if we needed to plug in things like, as an example, PSA, it wasn't going to be super difficult to do that. We could just say, well, okay, attach the property to the project as a random example. The product catalog had grown up quite substantially since 2013. So there was so much embedded between sort of products, opportunity, quotes. We didn't end up using order and invoice, but we thought, well, there's no use in messing with that. We also utilized the price list quite a bit, which worked really well. The other thing that I found is that when the opportunity to quote functionality was already streamlined, and there were loads of calculated fields. So we didn't want to mess with that either. We figured that, it's already there. Let's not break it. Let's kind of keep it as it is. The decision not to use the contract entity was interesting because apparently that's being deprecated. So there was a bit of foresight in the fact that the functionality in this entity was more locked down, and we didn't really get the type of functionality we wanted to from the standard entity, which worked quite well. So thumbs up there. Some of the stuff we struggled with, and we try and always put these sort of at the end so that people can see that it's not as straightforward as we think. Interestingly enough, the document templates, my bad. So changes to the core stack we were worried about. We were kind of worried that if anything happened in that FM module or our facilities management module, we would have to support those changes. We needed to be able to plug into vanilla dynamic CRM implementations. So if somebody had a standard implementation, they said, look, we'd like a basic kind of facilities hierarchy or asset hierarchy. We wanted to be able to plug into that, and we'd had to put in some governance around that. That was more from the business perspective. The next thing was around documentation, and we really struggled. We were utilizing DocuSign to kind of send out the documents and get them signed back into Dynamics, but we wanted to store them directly in SharePoint, and we decided to use the document call pack from MS-CRM add-ons. And actually, it was kind of, they already had got a pre-built integration to DocuSign, which worked fairly well for us as well. But they didn't really interfere with the standard CRM templates. So if we needed to start using those, the document call pack didn't really break that. We could kind of just turn that on and build that in if we needed to. The only issue with that is we'd have to manipulate the workflows, and there'd probably be an element of custom code. So utilizing an ISV like document call pack really solved a lot of problems for us there. But in saying that, the one thing I did like about it is kind of molded into the solution, and one thing led to another, and it really just became a kind of very core part of the solution. So to see that, just to give you guys a quick peek, that I'm not speaking utter rubbish, if I go into Dynamics 365 from a facilities management point of view, and this is my FM solution, it's only got demo data, and it's got some very basic kind of, it's more on the demo side than the POC side. You can see that facilities management solution, there are a bunch of custom entities that have been added here, right? You can see I've made use of the field services customer asset entity, just rebranded that, but you can see that most of this is custom, right? If I drill into my asset hierarchy to show you, just give you a quick peek at what this looks like, and I drill in, you can actually see that I've got my primary asset hierarchy. This is for this specific company. If I drill into the relevant addresses, and please understand that these are all separate entities, right? What I did is I built a custom entity to bring all the separate entities together, and then it associated it to itself. So that worked quite well as well. So from the asset hierarchy point of view, if I drill into that, you can see I've got the different properties. I've got the different floors in each property. What I can do is actually drill into the property record. There you go. And you can see I've got all my associated information. This is Paul Moreira's Client 360-degree view, which I'll chat to you a little bit about later, actually. It's something interesting there. Associated floors, I've got my associated units, my different assets and components. And I can just simply drill directly down into the specific unit that I'd like to get to. And this could be a room or a building, whatever you guys would like to frame it as. Just remember that this is the XRM piece, so Extended Relationship Management. And as I go down, you can see I've got my different assets associated here. One thing that I did mention is that in the solution, we had the ability to associate cases across any level of the facilities hierarchy. So essentially what you're seeing here is that hierarchy I just showed you. If I drill into my cases, you can see I've got boiler repair. Let's just drop into that one. And this is effectively more, this is basic configuration within Dynamics. I haven't done anything crazy here. I've just added some SLAs, some basic business process at the very top, some kind of core knowledge-based stuff. And I mean, this is really utilizing what's out the box. So this is what I would call low config. And the previous set of entities is what I would call high config. You can see that this is in 8.2. I'm busy porting it over to V9. I'll probably do it as soon as V9.1 comes out. That's very cool. So you've got the ability to kind of manage all of that. You can see that this is my asset hierarchy or my facilities hierarchy. If I drill back into the unit record itself, there's my information all associated there. I can roll up the assets. I can roll up all the activities if I really need to. And again, this is also associated to the field services side of things. So if I really wanted to, based on that case, I could create a work order and then schedule that. And that's also out the box. So it utilizes that core kind of field services functionality. And again, the most important thing is that is the XRM piece. It just plugs into those elements over there. Okay. Just a quick peek. So from a applications point of view, just so that I'm not speaking absolute porcupines, this is one of the application processes that we built. It's a bit of a beast. This is an old application, but you can see there's a load of information there. I applied some SLAs, but essentially the process was fairly detailed. There was a lot that had to be done, and it's a bit naughty, but there were a load of different branches. Again, this is a demo system, right? There were a load of different branches within the process that this could take. So from an FM point of view, just to quickly cover off that piece, essentially all we did was we implemented a kind of core XRM set of functionality for facilities management. We utilized the standard accounts record. We built in our own custom contract record. We used the standard opportunity for applications and the standard quotation. And then obviously along the side, you've got your case management and your field services running. And then again, from this point of view, we utilize the document core pack for the document management piece as well as SharePoint. Now, the thing that's interesting is why is that future-proof? Again, sorry, not why is that future-proof? Why is that all important? Well, we utilized full XRM functionality. We utilized a ISV to kind of leverage and build onto that. And then we also utilized a lot of the core kind of out-the-box functionality. Right. So that being said, right, do you guys have any quick questions before I get into the stuff we learned? Should I just drop into the view and have a look? Oh, there we go. Okay, so, right, no questions, cool. You guys rock. Thank you for listening to me drone on. But essentially, so that was what we did around FM. So stuff we learned, this is always quite important. And oops, sorry, that's the future bits and pieces. There we go. Let's get onto that one. Sorry, guys, I mislabeled the slide. Right, so stuff we learned. Well, the requirement for the use of out the box versus config, high config is completely down to the scenario. When I started researching this some time back, man, I found so many blog articles around people saying you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. And then there were a number of guys that said, well, look, it's really down to what you've got in front of you and what the requirements are. The one thing that I know it's scary, and I have to bring this up, but always remember the licensing implications. If you create a custom entity that replicates a standard entity in Dynamics, your customer needs to be licensed for that functionality. Okay. Now there are some rules around that, and there is a line in the licensing guide that actually says that, which I'm happy to leave off with the rest of the presentation at the end. In most scenarios, from a vanilla implementation point of view, leveraging as much out the box as possible, as it's known and supported by Microsoft. Now, that's just my kind of preference, and I kind of push people to do that. It's probably the best plan, and you'll find that you're going to get a lot more leverage on that, and you're going to get a lot more support. Sure, building those awesome XRM functions like the FM solution, go right ahead. That's epic. Just as long as you're just able to plug that in, or the other bits of Dynamics into that. Keeping an eye on the roadmap was extremely important, so we could plan for when Microsoft released out-the-box functionality. I cannot reiterate this enough. Well, just my feeling is that keep your eye on the roadmap as much as you can. It's really, really helpful. There's the roadmap sites. I've posted a blog post around where you can go to look at all of this stuff. It's really been useful for me. The MVPs put out such a good amount of information as well. I stalk most of them, and I've gotten most of my information from them. So it's definitely worth kind of following them all on Twitter. Sometimes interim ISV solutions become a core part of the solution. So things that I've seen embedded massively are things like click dimensions, where the need for marketing automation is required. Yes, Microsoft have released their marketing products. I'm not going to say too much about that now, but it's really important to remember that it does often become core and key. So things like the document call pack, once again, have really helped us. There's loads of other ones. I'm not going to throw out any names. Those are the ones that I've just seen, massively embedded. I don't think that's a bad thing. What's great, about ISVs is that they work with Microsoft to make sure their solutions, are approved. And I definitely think that it's worth taking a look at some of them. When building on top of a Dynamics 365 solution, sometimes out the box can't be the answer. I've walked into some horrendous implementations of Dynamics in my time. And I've seen some interesting things being done. And again, sometimes the customer wants to keep that. You can advise as much as you want, but they don't want to go that route. They want to keep and build on top of that. It's really up to you on how you do business. My theory is, we'd always try and say you might want to begin from scratch, but if you don't want to, you might have to build it custom. And again, that's just down to how you guys work. Some functionality in Dynamics 365 is so streamlined, it doesn't need much config. And again, if you think about the opportunity to invoice process, well, the quote to invoice at least, that's massively important. There's loads of calculated fields. That process works really well. It's there to help. I've personally customized the hell out of it before, and I've left it as vanilla, and I've won both ways. It just really depends on how you guys work. Be aware of things that are going to be deprecated. You really don't want to have to unpick your config. So apparently the contract entity will be deprecated. I personally have never seen it implemented before. But again, that's just something to keep your eye out. Guys, I'm going to take a bit of a dig with the next one, but be aware of stuff that has been deprecated, and the deprecation message has been deprecated. So i.e. the Outlook client, right? That's just something to keep an eye on. And, it's something that we had to warn people against. I know some of the MVPs had actively gone out and said to the customers, this may be deprecated or will be deprecated. It's not the case anymore. I just make sure I always keep my eye on Twitter and LinkedIn for that type of thing. Then think out the box when it comes to config. So I know it's an oxymoron, but try and think about ways to do certain things with just configuration. So I'm going to give you an example. A little while back, I built an activity scoring model using just config. And it was quite cool because all it did is the model basically scored each activity depending on the level of it. So a phone call was worth like 3, an email was worth 5, a received email was worth 7. And all I did was I added up those scores, and you'll see it on the demo. It's just a kind of quick drive through. But that's something I've done with just config, and it worked quite well. But then select, if you're going to use ISV, select them carefully. So obviously AppSource is a good spot. Just please make sure they're 100% supported by Microsoft and that their code is supported. Jeff, the guy on the side of the road, might have a really cool, accelerator, but is he going to support that? And is that going to be something that you can upgrade? So people like click dimensions, absolutely. They work with the upgrades. Definitely, one of the more kind of, I'd say trustworthy ISVs from my point of view. But yeah, just make sure that when you pick an ISV, get a good relationship with them. Check on AppSource. CafeX is another good one. And I've just found that, that's really important. Right. So before I get onto some of the more cool little tidbits. Do you guys have anything you want to ask or say? I'm assuming no. If you do, just prop it in the window and I'll get back to it kind of as I draw to a close. So there's some awesome new things to look out for from a roadmap point of view. So obviously the marketing release for Dynamics is now under public preview. I got into a little bit of trouble because I may or may not have released something a little early. I didn't realize. But anyway, you can talk about it now. It's not like the first rule of Fight Club. So you're all good. I got myself a public preview and I'm busy meddling with it, but I'm not going to demo it because I haven't learned it properly yet. The next thing, custom control framework. This is of imperative importance. When you release, or when you get 9.1, this is going to be, my assumption is one of the biggest releases that comes out. A lot of people actually don't know about it, but the custom control framework basically allows you to generate custom controls across attributes that you generate within the system. And it promotes some more kind of user-friendly and interactive user experience. So there's some very cool ones. I'll give you a live demo of this shortly, but that's sort of what they look like. These little Client 360 views, and they are not custom controls, they are web resources. The reason I've brought this up is because you need to start considering, and this is from a future-proofing point of view, what is going to be a web resource and what is going to be a custom control. And if you can fulfill the need for a custom control, for a web resource by using a custom control, I know that there's a lot of technical requirements around here. I mean, the different type of coding that you'll use, and MVPs like Andriy Butenko, I think it is, will be able to probably explain a bit more about it than that. But what I do know is that in some of the next releases, you'll be able to create your own ones. And that's quite cool. So as an example, this is Paul Murray's Client 360. That's a web resource that could be built out into a custom control. And then obviously the new unified user interface, which you're going to see some of today. Those of you that haven't, we did post a blog article some time back just with some of the bits and pieces that we found didn't work so well and some did. Have to be honest, it worked super well once they allowed us to generate the emails as activities within the solution. There is a bit of work to come, and I think you're going to start seeing kind of this grow as the releases come out. So my theory is just keep an eye out for 9.1 because I think that's going to be pretty epic. So quickly onto a custom control demo. I might have to just fly through this a little quickly. But anyway, this is the Dynamics 365 unified user interface, and it's the customer service hub. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop into one of my accounts. So let's just get in there. Come on, don't be slow. Fantastic. And we'll just search for something very cool. I don't know if you guys saw that blog post about that Megan put up about the emojis. So this is just something that I did a little while back. Apparently Alpine Ski Lodge is not having the greatest customer service, but we'll leave it at that. So if I dive into Hitachi Solutions Europe, this is my account record. So for those of you that haven't seen the unified UI, this is it. I've got my timeline in the middle here. If I go into my scoring, and this is a little activity scoring module I built out some time back, which kind of allowed me to say, well, just give it a sec, kind of allowed me to say, well, based on activity scores, what is the value? And all it did was it counted the number of emails, it counted the number of phone calls, and then using a custom control basically gave me the full amount. So unfortunately for my email, phone, and total score, oh, that should have updated. But for appointments, I've got a 50 out of 50, which is really good. So that means that my customer service should be through the roof, and you can apply some cool stuff around that saying yes. Oops, sorry, I'm a bit silly. I went to the contact record. No, I didn't. Nope, went to the account. Never mind. Anyway, from a case management point of view, I'll give you a quick peek into what that looks like. So if I open my services request and review, this is a standard case in Dynamics. If I pop open my custom controls over here, there we go. So we've got some pretty awesome ones loaded in here. We've got a radial knob, and as you can see, my naming convention is utterly fantastic. Kept it very original. Linear slider, you've got the multi-select. This is by far my favorite one. Just select badges over there, and we'll select option 2. I did put a blog post out about this some time back. Arc knob over there, cool. You've got your star rating over there. You've got your pen control. This actually also exists in 8.2, believe it or not, so you can add a custom control in 8.2 for a pen control. You've got a barcode scanner. I haven't managed to get it to work yet in the web interface. It works in the mobile, and if you go watch my video, you'll see that I'm having a terrible hair day when I test this out. And things like your linear slider again. Right. So, I've also applied a custom control to this subgrid. So this is an editable grid over here that I can just add in information. Hi there. Oopsie, that's a terrible one to edit. There we are. So that would also count as a custom control. If I go back into Dynamics, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how I added these little bad boys. If I go into Dynamics, you can see that this is my web refresh, so we'll close that one down. This is the web refresh version. If I go into my configurator and I go case for interactive experience, let's pop this guy open. And I scroll down, you can see that these are the custom controls, right? If I go and add in a pre-created field, there we go. So we'll go to number 6, one of my fantastically named. Let's just move it up to the top. Right. And what you do is to apply the custom control, you simply double click. Yep. Go into the controls over here. And the control that you select is always going to be relevant to the attribute type, right? So I've got a load of different ones. Gives you a preview. So let's just scroll down. Big fan of the radial knob right there. Add. You've got some properties that you need to fill in. So the minimum value is, you can either attach it to a field or make it static. So I'm going to make that 0. The maximum amounts, we're going to make that, we're going to give it a value of 10,000. Cool. And we'll make the steps. Let's make it 1,000. Whoops. So that'll be the incremental value. Hit OK. Oh, whoops. Going to make it available for web, phone, and tablet. When it says web, this does not mean the web refresh, right? It means the unified user interface. If I hit OK, save, and eventually publish. Right. There we go. Come on. I've always wanted to, I should get elevator holding music in my demos. I was starting to think that. Right, so there you are. That's been published. If I go to my customer service hub and I pop in there, that field will then be available on the case entity. So let's drill into service request views and custom controls. Number 6, there you go. Whoops. Come on, let me. There we are. Cool. Right, so that's what a custom control looks like in there. Simply save that, and if we jump back into your standard view, you'll see the actual values sitting directly against that attribute itself. Let's give it a mo. There we go. We'll just use the shortcut over there. So it's custom controls, and that's the kind of output you'll get. So you can still apply things like workflows and reporting and things to the options that you select in the custom controls. Right. So that being said, I see we've got 10 minutes to go. My guess would be something very cool that I wanted to show you is the fact that with custom controls, one thing to remember is that it is not the customer care framework. So some of you may be shocked. Those of you that worked in CRM 3 and 4 and sometimes 2011 may recognize that. Do not panic. It is definitely the customer control framework. So when you see CCF, don't worry, this doesn't exist anymore. Right. So from my point of view, just quickly to summarize really fast. So what we did was we chatted a little bit around, why you need to make Dynamics 365 future-proof, and it's all around, the ability to kind of promote more usability, get more customers on board, get them to grow the system, and then obviously based on that fact, you can really get that future-proof. Went through 2 examples, so one with a very minimalist configuration and out-the-box functionality using the case header as well as the subcase records. The second one was around the facilities management hierarchy that we generated. That was using really true, extended relationship management functionality, also plugged into kind of out-the-box functionality, which we did some very basic extension to, obviously focused on the demo. Things that we learned, well, it's important to understand that it's not always going to be out the box or custom dev or custom build. It could be a massive combination of both. It really just depends on the clients and the scenario and the requirements. One thing that I always take away from this type of thing is that you need to keep your eye on the roadmap. So kind of watch your customers' requirements. You sometimes have to have foresight into your customers' requirements. Keep your eye on the roadmap and say, well, when is this going to come? When do they need it? And can this potentially happen now? Do we need to custom build? Do we need to add in something in the interim? It's really dependent on how you guys do business. And then a couple of things to look out for. So I showed you, the very basic Dynamics 365 for marketing is available in public preview, so it's worth going to have a look at. I can't demo that yet because I'm not proficient. Custom control framework, which is massive. I think it's going to be quite a big part of the next release as well. You'll have the ability to create your own custom controls, which seems, I don't know in which release at least, but what will happen there is that you need to make a choice between web resources and your custom control framework. And then finally from there, just chatted around a little bit of a demo, showed you how it worked. Very basically nice and easy to create them. I'd suggest some experimenting. Give it a try and see what you come up with. That was the best I could come up with. I know my friend Matthew Webb has done some more crazy stuff with it, and his recording will be out there as well. So from a future-proofing point of view, again, guys, it's just really about understanding your customers' requirements and trying to have foresight with them, having visibility into the roadmap. And then when you're doing your config, make sure that you're adding or generating config that is kind of future-proof. So when you do upgrade, when you do add a new functionality, or if your customer needs something new, you've got the ability to do that without too much trouble. Okay, so from me, that's pretty much it. Got 8 minutes. Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything like that? I see Mike is typing something. Okay, I can try and answer it. So Mike says, I have a very specific question on multi-select because you mentioned it. If I can't answer it, I'll have to take it away and respond when I can. Okay, have you anyone been able to map a global multi-select from a parent to child? No, I haven't actually tried that, to be very honest. I can give it a crack and then feed it back to you. So that's definitely something that we could do. Mike is still typing. I tried and couldn't get it to work. Just curious to see if it was me or back. No, I'll give it a try and then feed back to you, man. My email address, I'll plonk it in. If you wouldn't mind just sending me a mail. Yeah, man, just drop me an email and I'll give it a crack and see if I can figure it out. Cool. Any other questions? Oh, wait, there we go. Ben is typing a message. Yes, it was. It's a pleasure, Ben. Anytime. Oh, it's a great pleasure. I really do hope this helps you guys get just a bit more vision into some of the stuff, the cool stuff you can do with config. Like I said, I've been running away from code for ever since I've been dev'd in Delphi. So, yeah, hopefully, I'll get better at it. But from a config point of view, that's what it is. Yeah, Luke, absolutely. So, no, good stuff. No worries, man. Luke, so what I'll do is we've actually been chatting directly to Paul Murray from Microsoft. So I'm sure if he feeds me back anything, I'll obviously share that across the community, and anything that comes my way, I'll send over to you guys.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chris. It was a very good presentation. And just a reminder for everybody, we will have this recording posted on the XRM virtual site. So if you did miss or had to drop at some point, then you will have a chance to watch all the parts of it and see anything that you might have missed, as well as share with any others that you might find this content relevant with. So please do share and tweet about the event. And again, just a reminder, if you do have topics that you'd like to present yourself, or you have a topic you'd like to see somebody else present, we're always open to hear. You don't even have to be a former presenter. If you're interested in doing a first-time presentation, we'd be more than happy to have you present to the group. Just submit us your topics, and then we will definitely get in contact with you. And again, thank you very much, Chris.
That's a great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it was awesome, man. Thank you, Colin.
No problem. And Matthew, I will definitely take that app for Outlook and put it to Julie, because I know there's been lots of discussion about the Outlook clients or the new Outlook clients lately with the undeprecation of the com add-in. So that is definitely a good topic. So thank you, everyone, and we'll stop the recording here. And if Chris wants to stick around, anybody has any questions, then feel free to ask Chris. And otherwise, we'll see you next time. So thank you again.